Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Rock Creek Coffee Roasters, home of small batch, freshly roasted coffee. Our guest today is Syren Nagakyrie, outdoor enthusiast, author, blogger, and founder of Disabled Hikers. Disabled Hikers is building a disability community and justice in the outdoors through resources, training, and advocacy. Syren is the author of numerous trail guides and travel itineraries for people with disabilities, and she is the author of The Disabled Hiker's Guide to Western Washington and Oregon. And this book was published this past September 2022 by Falcon Books. Syren, it's a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Now, for our listeners, I had the chance virtual encounter with Syren because I had read an article that was published by the Audubon Society of Portland, or Ali Berman, and I thought we had just published our episode with Ian McKay. He is the founder of Ian's Ride, and I thought, oh wow, this is pretty cool. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in the Pacific Northwest, and I thought I'm really excited, Syren, that you agreed to be on the podcast. It's again great to have you here. I would love if you could, for our listeners, just kind of introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and where you've been and how you got to this point of being the founder of Disabled Hikers.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm Syren Nagakyrie. I use they, them pronouns, and I am based in Northwest Washington State on the Olympic Peninsula, but I've lived all over the country. I actually grew up in Florida and spent a good portion of my 20s in Western North Carolina, which very much all helped really develop my love of the outdoors and my wanting to experience hiking. But I grew up with multiple disabilities and chronic illnesses even as a kid. So I really couldn't go out and do a lot of the same activities as my peers. We didn't go camping. We didn't go hiking. We didn't do summer trips, things like that. But I spent a lot of time just hanging out in my yard and watching the birds and the bugs and, watching the moon at night when it was like way too hot and muggy in Florida to be out in the day. And just really that helped me develop a real appreciation for the nature that surrounded me on a daily basis, even when I was just like sitting in my yard at home. So I feel like that really instilled in me a sense of connection and a sense of belonging that I didn't feel with my peers and with society in general. So I grew older and wanted to experience more of the outdoors. I enrolled in some education programs like earth sciences, and I did an herbal education program and was able to start getting outdoors with other people and really experiencing nature in a different way. And that was, of course, both good and bad. It gave me some really incredible experiences of being in the outdoors, but also it really highlighted even more how little people understood about disability and my needs and what access meant. So, yeah, this really was instilled in me from an early age.
Okay. Okay. Now, you mentioned that growing up, you didn't spend a lot of times out of maybe your local environment, getting out into the woods, rivers, trails, things like that. As you grew up, were you in like the public schools? Were you exposed to individuals who maybe had any passions like you now have, and maybe were that little bit of spark? Sometimes we have sparks that we are on the receiving end of, and they don't show up until later in life. It's like this aha moment. Is there anything that really kind of sparked you to go down this path that you're on right now in terms of being an advocate for the disabled and for their access into the outdoor space?
Yeah, not so much as a child, but I would say in my early 20s, I enrolled specifically in an herbal education program and started going out and learning how to be with the land in a slower and more mindful way. that really helped me develop a different kind of appreciation, exposed me to a different way of being outdoors. And I learned that there was ways that my body could still be out in nature and have a meaningful experience. So from there, as I continued having these experiences and just meeting other folks who were disabled and wanted to be outdoors but didn't know how, didn't have access to resources, didn't have access to information, that really kind of just started planting those seeds, right? And then sorry, my brain is blinking.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm curious, and in fact, you sparked a reminder for me. Is so I'm a member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America,
Mhm.
which, if you haven't heard of it, you really should, being the writer and the blogger and the author, because the organization is full of them. There's an individual, her name is Bridget Butler, a phenomenal woman. She's out in the Pacific, not the Pacific, the Atlantic, up in the Vermont area.
Mm.
And her program is birding, and she has her interest is in birding, but she has what her program is called slow birding, which is a lot of birders, they want to get out, they've got to run down the trail looking for the birds. And her position was sometimes you just have to sit in the moment and observe the things that are around you. And so when you had said that you included the word slow in this last description, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that now. It's important. And I'm curious or wonder if perhaps with a disability and perhaps being forced or in a position of having to slow down and be present and in the moment, that in itself, I think, is special because you really begin to see and hear, smell, maybe even taste the things that are around you. And
Mhm.
I think that's pretty phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So much of outdoor culture, I feel like, is so focused on like rushing to the next mountain peak and like getting in as many miles as quickly as you can and conquering this trail. And when you do that, you really do miss a lot of the natural environment and that ability to really experience things on a small scale that I feel like is so important if we're really going to help develop more of a stewardship mindset in the outdoors.
Sure. Now, as you were beginning to incorporate all of this interest and passion, insights into being outdoors, is there one particular activity that, and I probably, this is like, Howard, that's a obvious question here, given the name of the website and your background, but I guess I should just ask, was hiking, was that what grabbed your attention first? Were there other activities that you kind of focused on prior to hiking taking such an important part of the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, hiking was definitely the first thing that really grabbed my interest. And I didn't really start hiking again until probably my mid 20s or so, mid to late 20s. I'm 40 now. And, but I always kept encountering all of these obstacles and barriers and a lack of information and lack of people who really understood what I needed. So I had to really spend a lot of time just figuring it out for myself and figure out what it meant for me to be outdoors, how to find the information that I needed, and all of that. And it all just kind of came to a head one day when I was out hiking on a portion of a trail that I was fairly familiar with, but I didn't find any of the information that I needed about things like stairs and rocky drop offs and steep places and things like that. And so I was out on this trail and just getting increasingly frustrated and annoyed and in pain. And finally reached my destination of a bridge over this beautiful waterfall and was standing there just exhausted and in pain and feeling frustrated. And in that moment, just inspiration struck, like the light bulb went off. And I said, why don't I do something about this? Like, enough. And I went home and wrote up a blog post about it and a little trail guide. And that really kind of was the real initial spark that kind of blossomed into the Tabled Hikers.